If you feel like our congressional leaders today seem a little more dull than their predecessors, well, you got that right. In fact, Republicans developed a plan almost 20 years ago to help make every institution in Washington just a little more stupid. Joining me now to talk about this is Howard Nations. Howard, we have a Congress that has been dumbed down to the place, honestly, where it's not just that people think they're a bad Congress because they appear to be. It is that we have a bad Congress because they don't even know the issues. I mean, they have been dumbed down to where it's almost indescribable. We haven't seen this in history, have we?
No, we haven't. Let me test your memory, Mike. Do you remember how Congress used to work? You had committee chairs with seniority who had experience, who knew how to run things. You had professional staffs of the committees, lawyers, investigators, economists who worked for the committees. You had legislative support staffs who were auditors and analysts and experts in given fields, such as climate change. They worked with the GAO, which is the Government Accountability Office, and the Congressional Research Service, and the OTA, which was the Office of Technology Assessment. They were nonpartisan. They generated decades of bipartisan information for both Republicans and Democrats, and we had a thing called compromise.
Okay, let me ask you something.
Politics was defined as the art of compromise, you know.
There was a fabulous article, and I think that's the article I want to talk about. A fellow by the name of Paul Glastris wrote The Big Lobotomy.
Right.
And I think some of the things you're talking about come right from there. And the thing about the big lobotomy, the interesting thing to me is Congress, when you had this influx of Republicans, basically took the position, we don't need to know anything, so we don't need the support staff, we don't need researchers, we don't need anybody determining whether the lobbyists are lying to us or who's correct, so they got rid of as many as they could. Isn't that kind of what happened here?
Well, they got rid of as many as they could, and there was also, the work still had to be done. So there was a major, major power shift to the very lobbyists that they were supposed to be maintaining oversight on and investigating. But their goal, this was engineered by conservatives, their goal was small government. And if they make government fail, what we have to understand is that if you want government to fail so that it looks bad to the American public, that serves the conservative cause. You know, Republicans have shown that they can get elected, but they can't govern. Their legislative skills limited primarily to redistricting. And their major goals of the Senate minority last year before the election was, you remember what they said? No, it wasn't about cutting taxes or cutting deficits. It was about defeating Obama. The legislative goals of the House do not pass anything. So that's what it's all been about since 1995, really.
Oh, okay, so it was safe for them to get away. In other words, when a bill would come before Congress that was an important bill, they would have a neutral arbitrator, researchers, saying who is telling us the truth about the facts and who's lying to us about the facts.
Right.
They would have lobbyists come to Congress. Lobbyists would simply make things up. They would create just absolutely fantasy stories. And then somebody had to say, no, this is a fantasy story because we did the research and here it is. Now Congress said, when the Republicans came into office, we don't need any of that. We don't care to know whether somebody's lying to us. Wasn't that the evolution of things here?
It really was. It started with Gingrich's contract on America back in 1995. He came in with 73 new right-wing Republicans. His immediate action was to cut the professional staff by a third, to cut the legislative staff by a third, and to kill off the Office of Technology Assessment. Why would you possibly need that? Then he dismantled the committee structure, centralized power completely in Gingrich himself. And what's interesting was what happened to the work, what happened to the policy development and research and number crunching and things of that nature. It was moved out to the lobbyist. There was a power shift where they sent it out to think tanks that were backed by Rove and the Koch brothers. They sent it out to trade associations.
In other words, they knew what the results was going to be. They said,
right.
we don't need neutral research here. All we need to do is send it out to the Heritage Foundation,
right.
and which is governed and created by the Koch brothers and every other right-wing billionaire inheritance baby in America. Send it out to those people, and when they send the material back, we're going to know that we're going to agree with it. And so there was no real effort to figure out what's truthful or what's not truthful. I mean, and that's where we are today, isn't it? On the issues like climate change. They only want to listen to the people they subcontract with.
Absolutely. Their idea now is to send it out to the think tanks, and then for a foregone conclusion that they're looking for to support their own positions that they come in with. But fundamentally, it's a total power shift to the lobbyist. Even the lobbyists are even in a position now where there was an article in the New York Times in May about the bill that was to exempt derivatives largely from the effects of the Dodd-Frank. And it was passed the House, substantially passed the House. It was killed in the Senate, but it was written by Citigroup's lobbyists. So they've sent out policy development. They've sent out everything to the lobbyists themselves. It's a power shift.
In other words, you used to have organizations like the Government Accounting Office. You would have the Congressional Research Service their role was to say, look, we're not Republican, we're not Democrat. We're simply trying to give you the facts. Now the example you just gave is rather than relying on those types of impartial organizations, they go out and hire the organization by way of a think tank to come back and tell them what they want to say. In this situation, as you point out, it was actually written by Wall Street, and then they want to use that. Now, let me ask you this. You followed this story about how this is how this goes bad. You followed the story where they asked the same thing to occur. They went out and they had their contractors, the Heritage Foundation kind of contractors, come up and say that Obamacare was a disaster because enough people are not signing up. Now they used their statistics, right?
Right.
And then they asked the heads of the insurance industry to come in and testify about those numbers. What did they find?
Well, what they found was that the research that was done was completely inaccurate because the issue was what percentage of the people who had actually paid their premium who had signed up for Obamacare. They claimed that only that a third of the people had not paid. What they included in that were the people who had not yet been billed for Obamacare, so of course they hadn't paid. When the insurance people came in, they said, no, our collection rate right now is around 80%. So the people they brought in to testify that they thought would support them, they were embarrassed if they're capable of embarrassment.
So it was all phonied up.
It was completely phonied up.
You had Republican congressmen phony up information by way of their private think tanks. In the past, what they would do to avoid the dumbing down of the truth is they would have their impartial staffers. They would have the Government Accounting Office. They'd have the Congressional Research Service actually do the numbers. But here they phonied them up, and then they were embarrassed when the entire insurance industry came in and said, this is all a lie. You're lying about, and this is an industry that didn't want Obamacare to begin with.
Exactly. Who does the work if you don't have the GAO and you don't have the CRS doing it? The work is now being done by trade associations, by lobbyists, by think tanks. And now they have the K Street Project, where they've taken the staff members, the GOP staffers that they've cut, and they're putting them to work directly with the trade associations and the lobbyists and the think tanks so that they're sure that when they pass along their policy development to those groups, that they get the right result there because their own former staffers are now working there.
So what we have now, and we're seeing this an awful lot, we're seeing congressmen come into office that have a net balance sheet for their net worth of about negative 1,000. They get into Congress, they get paid the $160,000 plus all the benefits, and then when they come out of Congress, if they do the right thing for K Street on this K Street project,
right,
that you're talking about for the lobbyists, if they are the yes men for the lobbyists, they come out of Congress, go to K Street, and they make millions, and that's their payday. Isn't that what the K Street Project is all about? And it's actually called the K Street Project.
Yes, it is. The K Street Project is all about paying off congressmen who do the right thing while they're in Congress, taking care of them and their staffers once they leave Congress, where they come out and collect big money, ex post facto bribery, if you will.
And we wonder why the American public believes that this, and this is the opinion, that this is one of the most stupid, dysfunctional Congress that most people can remember in their lifetime. And they wonder, well, how the hell did that happen? Well, the story's right here, The Big Lobotomy by Paul Glastris. I think it's an eye-opener.
It really is.
Howard, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, Mike.